Hey, what's going on, family? What's going on, beautiful people? It is Friday afternoon. I'm here on Central Time frame, so it's about 5:30, and I'm here outside of Houston, Texas. And I wanted to come on here and get a good reading in. This video is being recorded over here on Facebook Live, but it'll be uploaded to my other platforms once this is done. Want to get into, the continuation of what we're reading over Noah Skafundrum's work. A shout out to Claudio Nicelli. He has several new books that are out, and I know you've been seeing them all over social media. At least I've been putting them out there. Can We Escape the Simulation? And I've been reading this in conjunction with the Book of Wisdom and also my personal favorite. All of them are my favorite, right? Actually, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. And I wanted to kick it off by just reviewing. I had a faux pas yesterday with the sound, so I just uploaded another video that I recorded at lunch. I will reshare that video over here. I think I already did, actually. If you scroll down on this page, you'll see it. And I want to piggyback off of that because I was reading Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? And we were talking about the fires, the flood, and the comet of 1811. And then I layered it in a couple of paragraphs from the Book of Wisdom. And I showed you a picture from Claudio's book here, Can We Escape the Simulation? The reason why I'm covering these three different topics is because, hey, sweetheart, my hubby joined me. The reason why I am covering these topics is because they're interconnected and we're building a foundation, okay? And obviously, I encourage each one of you to purchase the books, do the research on Tartary, do the research on Antarctica, do the research on the elite families and the 13 bloodlines, the Vatican. There's so much information out there that you can get lost in the rabbit hole, right? So I'm just trying to make some sense of it. Shout out to Chief Red Wolf, Camiro, Original Lone Wolf, 7 Grams. I have so many people in my Rolodex that I'm recalling right now. Everybody does wonderful work. Jay over at Woodward TV, Leak Project, Rex Bear, the Redacted team over there, Clayton and Natalie Morris. I'm just telling you, there's a lot of people putting the puzzle pieces together, and it just behooves you to start paying attention to the things, that are going on. So what I want to pick up is I want to talk about what we read yesterday over here. I covered, if you remember, we talked about the custodial orbs, all right? And we also talked about how they use the mass media, the information in the media, and how they utilize that to their advantage to keep people distracted on things that we really don't need to be focused on, right? It's a tool that they use, okay? So chapter 10, we're going to get into the celestial lands, and I want you to pay close attention to this conversation that Claudio was having with one of the ancestral humans who came from beyond the ice walls, who lives here in the known lands. There are multiple people, okay, that are here from the other worlds. They're here, whether you know it or not. We are living in the days of quote unquote Noah. All right. You guys know, if you follow me, we've had 6 resets at least. Okay. 6 mud floods, which means 6 civilizations that have been destroyed. Right. We're the new humanity. Guess you would say we're number 7. Right. And so he's having a conversation with this woman so he can kind of put the puzzle pieces together himself and reshare the information. All right, so let's get into it. Chapter 10, the celestial lands. Of everything that has happened to me since my conversations with Helen Morris, there is something that struck with even more intensity, especially since I began reading texts from the great ancestral library. That's my dream, to go there and read and just spend my days there beyond the ice walls in the ancestral republic. I'm telling you, it's as if the words I read or hear become mirrors in which I see reflected not only my own story, but the very structure of my mind. It's something quite difficult to put into words, but I believe I've come to understand that memory is always the past. Even memory I have, no matter how vivid it may seem, it is just a trace of something that no longer exists. Even the emotions that arise when I recall a happy or painful moment are nothing more than the residues of an experience that has already passed. Helen explained it to me very clearly one night. Memory is always limited, Claudio. No matter how much you store, it is always a fragment, never the whole. And I have seen it. Memory is useful for navigating the world, but it becomes a prison when we believe it is all that we are. Okay. I'm going to say that one more time. Listen to what I just said. And I have seen it. Memory is useful for navigating the world, but it becomes a prison when we believe it is all we are. Hey, Jamil. I have spent many hours alone asking myself who I would be without my memories, right? And he says, if I could remove from my mind all the images of my childhood, my achievements, my failures, my fears, my desires, would there still be a me or a true self, right? I've come to understand that identity is almost entirely woven from memory. And it is precisely that narrative of self that the invisible dome projector uses to keep us captive. It will plant memories in us if needed. It will project images of the infinite universe to make us feel small. Okay. It will try to convince us that safety lies in continuing to do what we have always been. Okay. What we continue to be, what we've always been, right? Stay the course. The more divided and differentiated from others, the better. Okay. So when I talk about this, Jamil, I have to shout him out. He's in the live. He wrote an excellent book. He has 2 books out. I've done videos over his stuff, and eventually we are going to get together and do a live stream. He has done the legwork. I'm telling you, if you do your genealogy, like he talked to me, my big bro, you do your genealogy and you lay your genealogy within that book, you've got the history right there. He's done it already. And it's a magnificent work of art, and you guys really need to read it. I'm serious. You need to go online and purchase his book. It's called Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy. And then the second book is I Told You, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy. That goes along and it ties into what we've been reading. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable when you start to put the puzzle pieces together. It just flows. It really does. So shout out to Jamil. Okay, so the division and being differentiated between all of us, that's how they assume control and they maintain control, right? Because if we're too busy fighting amongst ourselves, we don't have the time to pay attention to what they're doing, right? The decisions that they're making that affects all of us, 8.2 billion people. And there's less than 350 people that make the decision. I'm just saying. So it says, all of this has led me to understand something fundamental. Memory is limited, and therefore, so is the perception, blah, blah, blah. Yes, feeling separated. So is the perception that arises from it. And as long as I see the world through my memories, I will continue to view it through filters of fear and fragments. Okay. But Helen revealed to me that there is something beyond memory, something that is not based on the past. She spoke to me of the celestial lands, not only as a physical place, but a frequency of consciousness. And remember, I talked about this yesterday at lunch about how they genetically tampered with the new humanity template. When they were doing the clones and repopulating the planet, they put a little extra in our, in the temples, okay, of the pineal glands that looks like tissue, but it's actually nanofibers. So frequencies plays a very big factor in our temples. I'm just going to tell you. All right. And the ancients knew that, but it's real. It's a real thing. Okay. So it says, in my silent nights, I've begun to glimpse what this might mean. There is a state in which the mind comes to halt. Okay. There are no images of self imposed by the IDP, which is the invisible dome projector. We know that when you go out and you look up at the sky, that is a projection. That's not the true sky. The true skies are written in text to state the waters above, we're in the in between, and then there's waters beneath us. Okay. Waters above, as is above, so is below, right? So when you peel back, for example, if that technology went down and we were actually be able to glimpse the sky, it would look like the ocean. Okay. And I can only imagine what it looks like. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, our sunrises and sunsets are pretty here, but that's just a projection, right? It's what we're learning. It's what we're reading. Okay. So then it says the images of the self-imposed invisible dome projector, no memories defining me. There is only pure perception. Okay. A perception that is not based on time, that does not arise from the past nor the project into the future, that doesn't even ask who I am, because in the instant there is no I separate from what is being perceived. Okay. Helen insisted on this. Connection with the celestial lens is not achieved by physically traveling beyond the dome. Oh my gosh. Okay. That's what I want to do. It is achieved when the inner murmur ceases and total silence is experienced. That's the stillness and the oneness that you get in meditation when you reconnect with the creator of all. Like I said, there is a piece of our, for a lack of a better word, I'm going to say on the video, soul, that these parasites cannot get to. The ancients call it nashama. There's different names for it. Energy, soul, your divine consciousness, your essence, right? They can only do so much. They can't get into that part of our bodies or our essence, if that makes sense, right? And so that's what she's talking about. We need to go to that stillness. Okay. So in traveling to the celestial lands, you're actually tapping into what some people will say the Akashic records too, the divine consciousness, the spark, the energy, the one, the great spirit, God, if you want to call it that. Right. So it says this also gives deeper meaning to why the custodians are so obsessed with the human being and why many beings simply disintegrated physically when attempting to cross the barriers of what we know as the celestial lands. When the custodians used other entities in order to try to see beyond the walls of this mysterious world, no one has ever been able to penetrate it. Okay. And that makes sense. You're not matching the frequency, right? You have to resonate at a certain vibration in order to even to begin to understand what this place is, to see it for what it really is, right? And that's why we're talking about ascension. That's why we're talking about these things. So we gather the facts, the knowledge, the information, and we assimilate that information, and then we digest it. I mean, and then you got to have time to process it and think about it, right? So then it says, he said, I have felt glimpses of it, brief moments in which there is no image of myself, and in which I have perceived a vastness that is impossible to describe. In those seconds, there is no fear, no question, no past, no future. There's only a sense that everything is deeply connected. That's because we're infinite awareness, having an experience in these different avatar bodies. We are sentient beings. As I've said many times before, and I know you guys have heard me say it, and y'all say it probably too. Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transformed. It can only transform into something else, right? I'm just saying. So it says, I have come to realize that as long as I remain chained to my story, I will keep seeing the world through the narrative of the invisible dome projector. Okay. Because the dome does not only project stars and galaxies, it projects identities. It projects the idea that we are isolated individuals separated from the whole. When we're born into these bodies, what do? Jab us up, separate us from mama, cut the cord, and they start the whole process. Most times moms don't even breastfeed anymore, right? They give them Similac or Enfamil, and, they start the programming and the indoctrination as soon as the baby, before the baby even walks. I'm just telling you, they've got the system so locked down. The majority of people can't even see that, right? And it didn't used to be that way. For the civilization, they were so much further along than what we are. We've fallen so much, right? I mean, we're seeing that as I'm reading, we're putting the puzzle pieces together real time, and we're seeing it. I mean, you can look around and tell, it's not just in this book. I mean, you literally, if you have the eyes to see, you can see it. So it says, but when silence prevails, even only for a few seconds, everything changes. The human purpose no longer seems to be what it once was. The search for safety or success. The questions like, what is the universe? Loses their weight when the veil of what is projected before my eyes falls away. He says, life stops being a process of accumulation of knowledge, experiences, memories, and becomes a state of absolute presence. Helen summed it up for me like this. It's not about erasing your memory, Claudio. It's about not getting trapped in it. Because as long as you are a memory, you will remain a slave to the narrative. But if you discover what lies beyond, then neither the invisible dome projector nor its distorting frequencies will be able to touch you. I have written this down to remind myself again and again that freedom is not about physically leaving the dome. Real freedom is about leaving the mental narrative that the dome projects within all of us. And maybe, just maybe, escape is possible. Okay. And that's what he said on this. Now we're going to get into chapter 11, behaviors and symptoms. And I want to share something with you out of the book of wisdom once we get through this chapter. This is going to go quick. Okay. So the next part, when they're talking, Helen, if the channel can influence what we feel or think, how can I know if something truly comes from me or if it's part of the interference? Remember, I told you in the previous chapter, it was talking about how the invisible dome was set up, how it affected us, and how our bodies were engineered. They changed some things with these templates, right? With our avatar temples, right? Some of us, not all of us, a few of us have been changed, quite a few, right? And like he was saying, if you remember me reading in previous chapters, he was talking about how you could equate it to, say, a river creating a new channel, right? And that's what this technology, this microfiber that's placed within the pineal gland, that's what it does. Okay, so it kind of mutes it interferes with our connection with source. Okay. They put that there, but it's not totally impenetrable. Like we can get through that part, that barrier, what I'm saying. But you need to understand that everything around us has been weaponized against us and it's used against us. So once you start to understand that and you know that, then you can make concessions to make changes, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying? So then he says, how does this manipulation show up in daily life? Is there any way to notice it? Helen closed her eyes, likely searching for the right words, and says, that may be the most important question of all, because if we don't learn to see how the mental noise operates in our daily lives, we'll never be able to deactivate it. The system in which the new humanity is immersed is extremely powerful, and it's not easy to recognize, at least not at first, right? And how does it manifest? First, through hypervigilance. That constant feeling that something might happen at any moment. Even if you're in a safe place, your mind stays on guard. We're constantly in that fight or flight. Okay, reptilian mind, right? Waiting for a threat. That's how we are. We're constantly living like that, right? Your body tenses, your breathing accelerates, and even you can't explain it. You live prepared to defend yourself from something that almost never comes. Okay? Many negative thoughts will arrive in that instant. The negative self-talk, right? That happens to me often. It's like a part of me is always expecting a danger I can't see, and that never really actually happens, right? Exactly. It's the most basic function of what they've called the reptilian mind. To keep you alert, but after the reset, that alertness stopped being a simple survival response and became a tool to keep you exhausted, anxious, distracted. Hey, cousin, distracted, completely submerged in the system that they want you to be submerged in. So our focus is always on the external, right? Job, work, kids, school, paying bills, vacations, religion, education, medical stuff. They have us bombarded by so many different things, especially when you go turn on the tell a lie with your vision. You see all different kinds of things. And those shows, if you start to really kind of flick the channels and look at the shows, you'll see exactly what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing, right? It's pretty clear. And now at this point, since I'm beginning to change and beginning to grow more, I don't even want the TV on, honestly. I mean, I really want to get rid of all of them, to be honest with you. But we have them here, and sometimes I won't unplug them and just let them sit on the wall. I won't even turn them on, really, seriously. So, I recognize that creates the mental noise, right? So it says, I thought those were just part of who we are. Many believe that, but the channel knows that when the fear and uncertainty grow too strong, the mind seeks refuge in the predictable. Every small ritual briefly calms that murmur, but at the same time, it sustains it. It becomes a feedback loop over and over and over. So like you feel like you're in a rat race and you're on a hamster wheel, right? That's what that is. That is the noise, right? That's the noise. Too many minds. And he says, and the inability to experience silence. That's a part of it too, right? Helen nodded. Yes, it may be the subtlest and very deepest symptom. Living with constant noise in the mind means you can't hear the silent space where you could remember who you are. The channel makes sure there's always something playing: thoughts, worries, repetition of past scenes, fear of the future, what's to come. It fluctuates between those realms, back and forth, back and forth. You're worried, you're worried, you're worried. The system was designed that way to keep us like that. And I'm telling you, it's terrible to think that even my memories might not fully be my own. Those words came from deep within me with total honesty. Some memories are authentic. Others have been molded, embellished, or distorted to uphold the narrative of the dome. What matters is to begin observing without judgment. Pause for a moment during your daily life and ask yourself, are these thoughts or feelings truly mine? Or are they part of the custodial system? And you'll be able to begin to recognize it, right? You'll be able to begin to recognize the unease. And he says, sometimes I feel a sadness that appears out of nowhere with no reason at all. Helen looked at me with infinite empathy. Yeah, I do too. I feel like I want to cry because it's like the more you learn, the more you grieve and the more you see it. And it's like we're on a speeding train and we're headed towards this huge concrete mountain or wall. And I'm pointing and I'm trying to get people to look, but nobody's looking. Everybody's just going about their own day. They're not paying attention. And yet until the train hits the daggone wall, right? That's what I feel like half the time, right? So she says, that sadness might be yours or it might be induced. The channel knows that when a human being is sad, their vital energy weakens. And it's true. And when they're weakened, they're less likely to question things. But you must not be afraid because even though this channel exists, there's still a sacred place within you that no external signal can touch. Every time you manage to remain in silence, even for a few seconds, you get closer to that place. Trying to quiet that noise will always be a step forward, even if it feels frustrating at first. In fact, some people manage to do it spontaneously. So the first step is to learn to see it and then try to silence the noise, right? There's no linear path to silencing the murmur. Observing without condemning is essential, right? Condemning is essential. Without fear, above all, because what is truly observed begins to lose power. It dissolves. And when the murmur loses power, a space appears where you can remember who you are, and it becomes a barrier between what is real and what has been imposed. All right. So then he talks about, I'm going to read one more, the ancestrals and the pineal gland, because this is the part that I want to piggyback off on this book over here about the body is the temple. Okay. So it says, after days of conversation with Helen, I felt as if I had opened one more door after another, only to always find more questions waiting behind each one. But one idea kept circling my mind. So I asked, Helen, until now, we've talked about a lot, what we've done, what they've done to us, about what they've implanted into our minds, about okay, but is there anyone who has escaped all of this? Okay, so in the previous chapters, we talked about how they use the mass media, how they use the custodial orbs, the orbs that we see in the sky, what the actual dome projector is, the mental noise that we experience, right? And remember I said the pineal gland is the gate. And she said there is something else entirely. These beings have developed the ability to craft nanofibers that perfectly mimic biological tissue. Remember in the video yesterday and the day before, I talked about how when people passed after they took the happy sauce injection, there were morticians that were having a problem embalming bodies because they had these fibers blocking their arteries, and so they couldn't get the fluid in. So they would have to spend what would take 45 minutes for an embalming. It would take 3 and 4 hours, right? It would take longer time because they had to pull the fibrous tissues out of the body to get the fluid in, right? Remember me saying that. So the technology exists, whether anybody believes it or not. Belief is a lack of knowledge and knowing. You can go look up the freaking patents. If you really want to find it, you can. Okay. And I may do that. I think I said I was going to do that anyway. So what he said was, he asked, does anyone escape this? Right. So she said, yes, there are those who never lose their connection to what is true. All of the ancestral humans can, and also the Anakin giants as well as some surviving human giants. They have kept alive a part of themselves that most of the new humanity has lost. Okay. What part did they preserve? Their pineal gland, because it was much larger then, right? On the staff of the Pope, on the top of the staff he carries, that pineal gland is right on top. And that's the nod to this. Okay. So it says their pineal gland, in them, it remains intact. It wasn't atrophied or replaced by an implant. It's still the gateway connecting the visible to the invisible. Though, or through it, they can perceive the vibrations, frequencies, and memories that the custodians have tried to erase from the new humanity. There were also some humans from this new cycle who managed to overcome the imposed barriers. My son Alex, 40-day fast, he did it. There are many others that have done it. Okay. And it says, and why couldn't they be interfered with? You mean the ancestrals? Because many ancestrals escaped alongside the human giants with help from the Anakin just before the reset. Okay. Some found refuge in protected areas beyond the ice walls. Right. And I read those different domes or different worlds to you. Right. I read that to you. We took time and went over that months ago. Okay. The 178 known worlds, right? And then others had ancient knowledge on how to shield their biology and mind. And the Anakin, by their very nature, possess distinct frequencies that cannot be altered without destroying them. My connection is getting bad. It keeps spinning. Have a beautiful weekend. Okay. I'm so sorry. I guess it might be my internet. You too, Jamel. And then it says, though they have tried and continue trying to bring about this total destruction, does that mean they can see through the dome? In a way, yes. They weren't subjected to the implants nor to the substitution of the manipulated dome reality. For them, the dome is almost transparent. They see beyond through the superimposed layers. They easily perceive when something is true and when it is part of the script. Not because they're better than the new humanity, but because they were born in other times and didn't experience the resets in the same way, nor the environmental and bodily changes that humanity suffered at the hands of the custodians and the Anunnaki. Okay. And why haven't they intervened more openly to help us? She sighed, an expression tinged with sadness. And she says, they do help, but they know that the true liberation cannot be imposed from outside. If someone were to arrive and destroy the system for you, the only thing would do is destroy your internal structures. True freedom is born from within. They can guide. They can spin truths. They can spread truths, leave signs, offer companionship, but they cannot replace the personal awakening. Besides, today the system has manipulated the new humanity so deeply that if people knew the giants were approaching these lands, they themselves would fight against them. Would we? I mean, really, would we? Yeah, we would. Yeah, we would. And what are the ancestrals like? Are they also human? Of course. They are human, although I consider myself ancestral because I come from beyond. But as I told you, I was born from a human of the cycle and an ancestral mother. The ancients preserve a living memory. They retain knowledge, ancient languages, and serenity that comes from understanding the true historical cycle and their deep connection. Their gaze is different. Not because they know more facts or due to years of technological advancement, which can help, but because their pineal gland isn't atrophied and they're not burdened with the fear that this atrophy generates within you. And the Anakin are giants, yes, but not only in physical stature. Their true greatness lies in the vibrational frequency, which is completely untouched by the mental noise. It doesn't affect them. Just being near them, even for a few moments, can bring a forgotten clarity back to the human mind, a clarity that had been dormant for centuries. But unfortunately, this doesn't always happen. Do they still live in these lands? The vast majority are beyond the ice walls, but there are still groups of the Anakin giants living beneath the surface in advanced cities. Many now destroyed that are connected through tunnels. All of these regions were created before the last reset during the age of Great Tartary. Is there any chance they'll return? They will return to the surface, and great groups will come back to these lands. I'm sure of it. But everything in its proper time. All right. So I've read Behaviors and Symptoms. I've read The Celestial Lands. Okay. And I've also read The Ancestrals and the Pineal Gland. When I come back, I'm going to read chapter 13, The Path of Silence. I'm sorry if the internet is breaking up and it's spinning, right? I apologize about that. What I wanted to read to you really quick, and I'm going to close this up. I want to talk to you about the body. The body is the temple. All right. And it says, when observing some of the structures of the ancient Hindus, we can see that they designed their temples based on the human body. They did this because they understood that the human body is the temple for the indwelling spirit of God. That's that place that they cannot touch, the silence that we're talking about. Consequently, the temple as the body of God on earth is allegorical to the human body. All the various parts of the temple structure correspond to different parts of the human body. I'm going to show you. For ancient Hindus, the temple represented the physical body, which houses the presence of God. The actual construction of the temple itself served as a profound symbol of God's presence in the world. The entrance of the temple often symbolized the feet, where devotees began their spiritual journey. The main hall, or the mandapa, represented the abdomen, where people gather and prepare for spiritual enlightenment. The sanctum, or sectorum, the innermost chamber of the temple where the deity resides, corresponds to the heart and the core of the human existence where the divine presence dwells, right? The spire or tower above the sanctum, known as the Shakahara or the Vimana, symbolizes the head, right? The head reaching towards the heaven and signifying spiritual ascent and enlightenment. This intricate design reflected a deep understanding of the human body as a microcosm of the universe and a sacred vessel for the divine. By aligning the temple's architecture with the human form, the ancient Hindus emphasized the intimate connection between the divine presence and the individual soul. The temple, as the body of God on earth, became a powerful reminder of the divine spark within every human being. And it says, in this way, the ancient Hindu temples were not merely places of worship, but profound symbols of the spiritual journey, illustrating that the divine resides within all of us. Okay. The act of constructing and entering a temple was seen as a reenactment, a reenactment of the journey to self-realization and the union with the divine, mirroring the sacred architecture of the human body itself. I'm going to hold this up and I want you to take a screenshot of it. Check it out. Can y'all see that? And I apologize. I probably should have closed the blinds. I probably should have closed the blinds off. Hold on. Sorry about that. That might be better. Haha. That's better. Sorry about that, y'all. All right. I'm going to hold this up one more time. Okay. So, I'm going to show you another picture. Crown chakra, third eye, neck, solar plexus, and the feet. Look at this. And then Solomon's temple, last one, is the soul of man. And it says, last part, the temple of Solomon, which is the third ventricle, the pineal gland, and the pituitary system. And then it shows you in no uncertain terms how the buildings were designed based on the human avatar template. And it says, the Temple of Solomon is symbolically constructed when the solar and lunar forces within an individual come into harmony and into unity. This balance represents the integration of opposing energies within us. Male and female aspect, balancing the energies, right? The sun and the moon, just saying. And it says the active, assertive solar forces and the reflective, receptive lunar forces. When these inner energies are aligned and unified, they create a stable foundation, much like the Temple of Solomon. Solomon, soul of man, or Solomon. All right, Solomon, which is a metaphor for a spiritual wholeness and enlightenment. All right. Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that ye are God's temple and God's spirit dwells within you? I'm going to hold this up one more time. Take a picture of this. This is what Solomon's temple actually represents. It actually is encoded metaphor for the symbology of the stability of those two energies within your body. All right. Here it is right here. Solomon's temple. So, I just wanted to bring that to you because we are discussing a lot of information and I want to make sure that I cover this and it makes sense because it is a lot of information to digest. And the thing about it is if you don't stop and you don't take time to go look at things and research things and really try to figure things out, you will pretty much stand for every single thing if you don't stand for something, right? You will be blown back and forth like a reed in the wind. Like you've got to have the stability in the foundation. And the stability in the foundation should be that you are a God incarnate, lowercase g. The creator of all lives within you. Your body is the temple. You carry that spark. The connection is within you, but you have to go within. And then this world is made to distract us, to keep us from tapping in to our true purpose and our true source, which is the connection with the celestial lands, the Akashic records, the great divine, God itself. Okay. The tapping into the consciousness and the energy. And I know how that sounds because if you've been conditioned and programmed to believe a certain thing, and to worship and to do certain tasks and to live your life a certain way because that's the way you were raised. And that's because that's the way you believe, which belief is a lack of knowledge and knowing, then you're going to have a hard time breaking away from this imposed system, right? Once you begin to look at it from a different perspective and a different lens, that's when you start to tear the walls down from this whole matrix, if you want to call it that. Like I've said many times before in videos, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to close up. At this point in time, you should not have to have faith. Faith is a religious term, and not to offend anyone, but faith is a lack of knowledge and knowing. It is a belief. Faith is tied to believing, right? They're interchangeable somewhat, right? Because at this point in time in your life, when you hit a certain age and when you get to a certain point in knowledge, you shouldn't have to have faith in the creator of all. Either you know it or you don't, right? And you're going into these places and you're praying and your communion and you're doing the rituals, right? The rituals of what they tell you. And then you're reading from this text, but you're only seeing it from one side. And so you really got to have a wider lens on to understand that everything that you're reading has a double-edged meaning to it. right? There's metaphors, there's symbology, symbolism. I may read about that tomorrow because we need to understand why there is so much symbolism and why people want to project this world as being, how do you say it? The religious connotation as, if you don't repent, you're going to die, you're in sin, you're going to go to hell. Like I've said many times before, heaven is a state of mind, and the sin is the lower energy that sits within the base of your spine. Hell is when your feet, your heels touch the earth because you are transcended from an etheric being into this physical matter, into this energy, into this perception that you're in, right? It's the lower perception, the lower aspect of the mind, right? The matter, right? I hope that makes sense. There is so much, sin separates us from God, but you got to understand what the sin represents in terms of your body, in terms of the temple, right? And I will cover that tomorrow. If the creator of all sees fit for me to come on here, I will definitely talk about sin separating us from God. The 7 deadly sins. I'll go back over that again. And, I've talked about what consciousness is, what the universal mind is, the etymology of the mind. I will talk about that. And I will also talk about the 12 disciples, which are the 12 cranial nerves, which are related to the 12 houses of the zodiac. Okay. That needs to be talked about, right? I know that you guys, probably some of you know this information, but there are a lot of you that don't understand that you're dealing with spirit and you're dealing with matter. The physical matter is where you're staying. We're living in that consciousness state. We're living in a lower vibration. And that is why we are separated, because we don't know this information. And then when someone tries to explain it to you, then oftentimes people are shunned away from it because it's considered to be a devil knowledge, occult knowledge. It's a sin. It's going against the church. It's blasphemous, blah, 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 blah. That's the religious connotation, because if they can keep you away from true knowledge, they will. And I have a call coming in, so I'm going to drop. I appreciate you guys taking the time out for me today. And I hope you guys got something out of the read. Be the change you want to see all around this Earth Dome, because it's up to you and I to make a positive change. I'll talk to you guys soon.